The book of Revelation is very simple. It should not have been debated over for 2,000 years. It's so simple. And it's just the fulfillment of things that Jesus Christ said while he was on earth. Everything in Revelation were words that Jesus said on earth. And then he came back, told John about it, and explained to John exactly what was going to happen. And it did happen in history. My name is DerichJester. God gave me the truth. I live off support. Check the description for ways to support this ministry and for books. People are waiting for Satan to be destroyed today, but Jesus said back then, while he was on earth, he said, "Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out." Not today. Back then, Satan was going to be cast out. Back then, Satan would be judged. Which he continued here in John 14. He said, "Hereafter I will not talk much with you." Everybody thinks they see Jesus every day of their life today. Millions of people claiming to see Jesus on a daily basis. They all see Jesus more than the apostles ever even saw Jesus, because Jesus was going away and wouldn't talk with them much, but that's for a different video, For the prince of this world comes and has nothing in me. So the prince of the world was coming back then. He was being cast down back then. And this is chapter 16, verse 11. Of judgment, because the prince of this world is judged. So Satan was cast down back then. He was judged back then. Now, Jesus said, while he was on earth, now we're in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, but while Jesus was on earth, he said the prince of the world was going to be cast out, that Satan would be judged, that he was coming because he was going to be cast down, right? And that Jesus wouldn't talk with them much. Why? Because Jesus was going away. He said, "I'm going away, the prince of the world's coming." So what happens here? You got the great wonder in heaven, the 12 tribes of Israel birthing Jesus Christ, right? They gave birth to Jesus Christ. And then there appeared another wonder in heaven, a great red dragon having the 7 heads, 10 horns, 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven and did cast on the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman and was ready to devour Jesus as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule the nations with a rod of iron. That's Herod trying to kill Jesus and all the babies around Bethlehem whenever Jesus was born. Right? But she brought forth Jesus. Israel travailed in birth and brought forth Jesus. And he was to rule the nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and to the throne. What happens whenever Jesus was caught up? Now was the judgment of the world. Now would the prince of the world be judged. And the woman fled into the wilderness. That's that. There was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought against his angels. Prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. That's whenever salvation came. Whenever Satan was cast down, they were able to go into heaven, because the accuser of the brethren was cast down, and they overcame him through Christ. That's whenever the power of Christ came. Oh man, I wasn't scrolling with the phone. Oh, that's funny. Alright, anyway. So, as Jesus said on earth, he would be caught up to heaven, and Satan would be cast down. And I was looking for... Yeah, there it is. "Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell therein. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil was come down to them, having great wrath, because he knew that he had a short time." And the woman was cast down. And the believers fled. The dragon persecuted the woman. But the woman was given 2 wings like a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time and times and a half time from the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out water out of his mouth like a flood, trying to carry her away. The earth helped the woman, swallowed up the flood. The dragon cast out of his mouth, and the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of the seed and people who keep the commandments of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. So, Satan was cast down back then, as Jesus said. Now was the judgment of the world. And then the believers, they fled into the wilderness. Well, when did that happen? Now, he told them while he was on earth, this is Matthew 24, so Jesus said while he was on earth, that whenever they saw the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, saying that the sanctuary and the temple would be left desolate, and the city would be left desolate, whenever they saw what was going to make that desolate come to Jerusalem, then those which were in Judea were to flee into the mountains. So the believers were to flee into the mountains before the temple was left desolate. Now Luke gives a clearer picture here. Matthew said whenever they see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, then they were to flee in Judea into the mountains, right? Luke says it better. He said whenever you see Jerusalem compassed with armies, whenever the Gentiles came and compassed the city, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. It was close. And let those which were in Judea flee into the mountains. So Satan was cast down back then whenever the believers fled into the mountain before the temple was destroyed. And let those which are in the midst of it depart out, and those that are in the countries not enter into it, right? So we see Revelation as a fulfillment of what Jesus said on earth. Jesus said this stuff on earth, and then he came back to John and told John right before he came back, whenever Revelation was written, he said, let those that are filthy be filthy still, and let those that are righteous be righteous still. Because that's how fast he was coming. He said because he was coming quickly. They don't have time to repent. So remain righteous or remain filthy, because they were all about to get destroyed or saved, right? So Jesus said that they would flee. Revelation said that they would flee. Jesus' words. And why were they to flee whenever the armies came to Jerusalem? Why were they supposed to flee? Because whenever those armies came, those were the days of vengeance, that all things which were written may be fulfilled, including Gog and Magog, the destruction of Satan, as we just read before. Now was the judgment of the world. Now would the prince of the world be cast out. And now was the judgment. The prince would be judged. The prince of the world would be judged. Back then, not today, 2,000 years ago. All right? So, those were the days of vengeance whenever all things which were written would be fulfilled. Right? But woe unto them that gave suck in those days, because there would be great distress on the land and wrath upon who? What is the wrath of the Lamb? What was the wrath to? The wrath to the whole world? No. Flee Judea. Don't enter into Judea. There would be great wrath upon this people, the Jews. And the Jews would fall by the edge of the sword, and would be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem would be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So we know that it was Gentile armies coming to Jerusalem, and they were going to tread the city, right? And Jerusalem would be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles were fulfilled, and the Jews would be killed with the sword and led away captive into all nations. This happened in history, and Revelation is simply a fulfillment of this. Revelation chapter 11. Now Jesus gives John the rest of the information. There was given him a reed like unto a rod, because the temple was still standing whenever the book of Revelation was written. Unlike Irenaeus and all these people that other people believe, people that said Jesus Christ was 50 years old whenever he was crucified. Jesus wasn't 50 whenever he was crucified, and you can't believe Irenaeus about when the book of Revelation was written. Because you can believe the book of Revelation. It was written before the temple was destroyed. So there was given him a reed like a rod, and an angel stood, saying, Rise, measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court, which is without the temple, this is specific to Herod's temple back then. The temple that Jesus Christ pointed at and said not one stone would be left upon another. It's specific to that temple. He said, But the court that is without the temple, leave out and measure it not, for it's given unto the Gentiles. And the holy city, what did we just read? Shall they trample underfoot for 42 months. It would be 42 months until the times of the Gentiles were fulfilled. How long was the war whenever the Gentiles came to the holy city? Until the temple was destroyed. The Gentiles came in 66 AD. The Roman armies did. The temple was destroyed 42 months later in 70 AD. What did Jesus say? The Gentiles would trample the city. The believers would flee into the wilderness. The Gentiles came, the believers fled. Everything Jesus said that he prophesied about already came to pass. They did. And there was great wrath upon the Jews. Remember what Jesus said? Whenever the Gentiles came, there would be great wrath upon the Jews. And they would fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all nations. Therefore, who was the beast? This is Revelation chapter 13, the chapter about the beast. What did he say? If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leads into captivity shall go into captivity. They that killed with the sword had to be killed with the sword. And what happened to Jerusalem, Israel, to the people? What happened to Judea? The Jews were killed with the edge of the sword and led away captive into all nations. What happens to the beast? The beast fell by the edge of the sword and was led away captive into all nations. Now, how long would the Gentiles trample the city underfoot until the times of the Gentiles were fulfilled? 42 months. How long before whenever the Gentiles came to the city in 66 AD, until the abomination of desolation, when after the believers fled? How long? 42 months. So 42 months the Gentiles were killing the Jews by the edge of the sword and leading them away captive into all nations until the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet whenever their temple was left desolate. And how long was the beast? Killed by the edge of the sword and led away captive. There was given the beast a great mouth, speaking, this is Revelation chapter 13 again, and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, right? And his tabernacle, because the temple was still standing, and those that dwelt in heaven. So the beast, Satan was cast down, right? Then came salvation, like we read in chapter 12, right? After Satan was cast down, where did it say that? He was cast out into the earth in chapter 12, and they heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now has come salvation and strength in the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ, because the stars of heaven fell. Whenever the stars of heaven fell, the wrath of the Lamb began. So the stars of heaven fall, and that's whenever salvation comes, because Satan, the accuser of the brethren, was cast down, no longer accusing them. He knew that he had but a short time, so he's cast to the earth. So the beast blasphemed those people that dwelled in heaven, because the beast ruled from when? So we know that whenever Satan was cast down in chapter 12, that the believers fled into the wilderness. And we know that they fled for 42 months. And then the Gentiles trampled the city underfoot for 42 months. And the Jews, the beast, fell by the edge of the sword and were led away captive into all nations for 42 months. And the first resurrection happened in 66 AD, whenever Jesus returned. And they were in heaven, because once Satan was cast down, now had come salvation. And then Satan chased the children into the wilderness. So the first resurrection was of the dead, and then Satan chased the remnant of the seed into the wilderness, the ones that were still alive. Now stay with me on this one. What was the wrath? The wrath was going to be on the Jews. They were going to flee Judea, but what was the wrath? It was whenever the Gentile armies came, right? That was the wrath of the Lamb, whenever the Gentile armies came. That's what he said. Whenever the Gentiles came, they would trample the holy city underfoot for 42 months. There'd be great wrath upon the Jews, and the Jews would fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive in all nations. Now Jesus is going to the cross. He's carrying his cross. And there was a great company of people and of women, and they bewailed and lamented Jesus. And Jesus turned to them and said, daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming in which they shall say, blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bare, and the paps that never gave suck. Then shall they begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, to the hills, cover us. That was going to happen to them, the daughters of Jerusalem, them and their children in that generation. So what happened in 66 AD? Because right here we're going to read every mountain and island, right? And they hid themselves in the dens and the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, who shall be able to stand? So this happens to the daughters of Jerusalem and to their children in their days. But what happened at the wrath of the Lamb? Satan was cast down. Whenever Satan was cast down, he knew that he had but a short time. Jesus began reigning. The first resurrection happened because the wrath of the Lamb came under the sixth seal in 66 AD. He opened the sixth seal, right? And the stars of heaven fell to the earth. That's Satan being cast down. And then, what did we read in Revelation 12? It said, now, once Satan was cast down, and his angels, which drew a third part of the stars, and cast them to the earth, right? And the stars of heaven fell unto the earth. Satan was cast down. Then, It said, "Now is come salvation in the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ, for the accuser of the brethren was cast down." And then it said, "Rejoice you who are in heaven," because that was the first resurrection. The first resurrection was the resurrection of the dead whenever Jesus Christ returned. This is what Jesus said while he was on earth. And all the people around Jerusalem and Judea, because the wrath of the Lamb had come, which was the Gentiles coming to Jerusalem, like we read, and the believers fled because they weren't appointed to wrath. So the wrath of the Lamb came, and they hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks and cried for the mountains and rocks to fall on them and cover them. Now what do we know for sure about Mystery Babylon? That in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints, and all of the prophets and saints that were slain upon the earth. All the blood of the prophets were found in Mystery Babylon. Again, Revelation 16. "For they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy." And we saw that Israel is the beast, and Israel is what carried Mystery Babylon. The beast carried the woman. Now where? Jerusalem was carried by Israel. Jerusalem was a city on 7 hills. Now here is Luke 13. Jesus was about a 3 days' journey from Jerusalem. He was making his way to Jerusalem. And they said, "Get out of here. Herod will kill you." He said, "You got to tell that fox that I'm casting out devils today and doing cures today, and tomorrow and the 3rd day I shall be perfected." He said, "Nevertheless, I must walk today and tomorrow and the day following, for it cannot be that a prophet perish out of Jerusalem. In her was found all the blood of all the prophets." A prophet can't die outside of Jerusalem. Jesus said, "They can't kill me. I'm not in Jerusalem yet." And they got to require the blood at Jerusalem's hands. "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, which killest the prophets." Who kills the prophets? Jerusalem. "And stones those that are sent unto them. How often you would gather them together like a hen gathered her brood under her wings, but they would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate." So, your temple's going to be destroyed, guys. I'm going to destroy your temple because you're killing me. You kill all the prophets. I'm going to destroy your temple. "And verily I say unto you, you're not going to see me again until I come back in the clouds. And you guys see me, and you hide yourselves in the dens and in the rocks and the mountains, and say, Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord." And then, I'm not coming back until all you guys' tongues are going to confess, and every one of your knees are going to bow to me. And they were going to see that in their lifetime. Well, let's just drive this home a little bit more, though. All the blood of the prophets and the saints were found in Jerusalem. Prophet cannot die outside of Jerusalem. Amazing, huh? What else does he say to Jerusalem? This is Luke chapter 11. He told them, they said, "If we lived in the days of our fathers, we wouldn't have killed the prophets." He said, "You build their sepulchres, you're of your father's works." And then he said, "Fill you up the works of your fathers." In other words, kill me. Kill me. Your fathers killed the prophets, and now you're going to kill me. Why? He said, "Here said the wisdom of God. God will send you prophets and apostles, and some of them you shall slay and persecute, that the blood of all the prophets, which was shed from the foundation of the world, may be required of this generation, from the blood of Abel," that's Cain and Abel, "till the blood of Zacharias," that's John the Baptist's father. The reason that that's important is because it says the law and the prophets prophesied until John, and then the kingdom of heaven was preached that it was at hand. So the law and the prophets from Abel until Zacharias, that was required at the hands of that generation, including all the apostles that were sent to them. They killed Zacharias between the temple and the altar. He said, "It shall be required of that generation." All the blood of the prophets. So, for the blood of the prophets to be required, the prophets have to be fulfilled in that generation also. But like Jesus said, when the armies came, those were the days of vengeance, whenever all things which were written were fulfilled. Now, the apostles didn't come to America. The wisdom of God sent the apostles to Jerusalem. And some of them they would slay, persecute, and crucify. He sent them to Jerusalem, not to America, not to Europe, nowhere else. He said, "Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her." The apostles and prophets were avenged on her. Here said the wisdom of God, I'll send who? Apostles and prophets. Jerusalem. Avenged on her. Matthew says the same thing that Luke said. Jesus says, "Ye serpents, ye generation of vipers, how can you escape the damnation of hell? Wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes. Some of them you shall kill. Nobody crucifies today. And crucify, because it happened back then. And some of them you shall scourge in your synagogues and persecute them from city to city. That upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, the son of Barachias, whom you slew between the temple and the altar. Verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them which are sent unto thee. Jerusalem killed them. How often I would gather thee together like a hen gathered her chickens under her wings, and you would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. For I say unto you, you shall not see me henceforth till you say, Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. And if you want to know the real story here, Jesus went to the temple. It says that Jesus and his mother, the temple was building his whole life, and it says they went to Jerusalem to the temple every single year, as was their custom, is what it says in the Gospel of John. So they went every single year. But whenever Jesus departed from the temple, his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. What? Hey, Jesus, you see this temple? No, I've never seen it before. Tell me about it. I just walked out of it. Tell me about the temple, guys. They were showing him how great the stones of the temple were. They were showing him because he just said, they just heard him say, he was coming back in that generation. You will not see me again until you say, Blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord. He just said that all the blood of the prophets would be required at the hands of that generation, and the temple would be left desolate in that generation. That is what he just told them. So they just heard this out of his mouth. That's why they said, Jesus, you see this temple? These stones are huge. These weigh thousands of pounds. It's decked with gold. Why would anybody want to destroy this, Jesus? Why would anybody want to destroy this? And how could they? This temple's a fortress that rivals anything in Rome. That's why they asked this question, because they just heard him say, hey, the temple's going to be left desolate. It's all coming on this generation. I'm returning in this generation. Right? That's what he said. And he said, do you see not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. See, Mark 13 actually gives the emphasis on it, And as he went out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, the other one said his disciples came to him privately. This one says, one of his disciples said to him, he said, Master, see what manner of stones and what buildings are here? Exclamation point. What manner? It was gold, it was pearls, it was literally decked with all manner of precious stones, gold and pearls. And you could see it gleaming from miles and miles away. They said in history that if you have not seen Herod's temple, you have not seen architecture. And Jesus answering said unto him, See thou these great buildings? There shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. These are the same verses whenever he says the abomination of desolation. Luke chapter 21, verse 5. And some spake of the temple, how it was adorned with goodly stones and gifts. This is goodly stones, it's costly stones, it's gift, it's precious, it's pearls. As for these things which ye behold, the days will come in which there shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. Now I explain who the horns and everybody are in different videos, but that's not what this video is about. It says, the beast, they hated the whore, right? The horns on the beast hated the whore, and they made her desolate, naked, and ate her flesh and burned her with fire. They literally starved them out to where the children of Israel were cannibals. They were eating their own children. They were eating their own clothing. They made her desolate, and they burned her with fire. This is Revelation chapter 18. And saying, Alas, alas, that great city, that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour so great riches has come to naught, because she was left desolate, guys. And they cast dust on their head and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by the reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour she is desolate. And as we read before, they were to rejoice over her, the holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged them on him. So, everything that Jesus said on earth, that's what the book of Revelation is. It was Satan being judged, the believers fleeing, the beast, Israel, being killed with the sword and led away captive into all nations. The believers fled Judea. Mystery Babylon, Jerusalem, being destroyed, her precious stones being cast down, the temple being left desolate, the abomination of desolation, all happening in 1 hour, which actually happened in history. All of these things happen in history. Anyway, the book of Revelation is very simple. It's so simple. If people just wouldn't have lied about it, it's the easiest thing to know. It already happened. It's everything that Jesus Christ prophesied about. The beast was Israel. Mystery Babylon was Jerusalem. The beast carried her. The 10 horns were the Roman soldiers. They made her desolate. They hated the whore. And Jesus Christ got power over the nations. He ruled them with a rod of iron, the Iron Kingdom, the Romans. The believers fled into the wilderness whenever the Romans came, and the Romans trampled the city underfoot for 42 months until the times of the Gentiles were fulfilled. And then their house was left unto them desolate, and all the blood of the prophets were required at the hands of that generation, because they were fulfilled, because those were the days of vengeance, whenever all things which were written were fulfilled. And the Jews, the beast, fell by the edge of the sword, and were led away captive into all nations. And that was the end of that. And just for a little kicker here, this isn't Jesus, this is Peter. But here's Peter. If you go read Acts, Peter lived his whole life in Jerusalem, and he never went to Rome. He lived his whole life after his conversion to Jesus in Jerusalem. He stayed in Jerusalem always. And he wrote his epistles from Jerusalem. And the church that is at Babylon, this is Peter 5, chapter 5. He said, the church that is at Babylon, elected together with you, saluteth you, and so doth Marcus, my son. The church that is at Babylon. They knew what Babylon was back then. Peter was not in Babylon. Sorry. And one more kicker for everyone before I go. It couldn't be any Gentiles. It had to be the Roman armies that came. And if we let thus alone, if they just let Jesus keep doing what he was doing, they said all men will believe on Jesus. And the Romans would come and take away both their place and their nation. And one of them, named Caiaphas, being high priest that same year, said unto them, ye know nothing at all, nor consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not. And this spake he not of himself. Since he was the high priest that year, he didn't even know it, but he was speaking a prophecy, prophesying about how Jesus should die for that nation, and also how the Romans would come and take away both their place and their nation. The book of Revelation is simple.